Our next panel will be about Bitcoin in El Salvador, and as all of you know, this month marks the anniversary of the adoption of Bitcoin as a national currency. On September 7th, 2021, Bitcoin officially became legal tender, and today, on the 17th of September 2022, 1 year later, it's a perfect time to talk about what has happened since the introduction of Bitcoin. It is my pleasure to introduce our two guests, Maria Luisa Hayem, the Salvadoran Minister of Economy who has been in office since 2019 and overseen the Bitcoin adoption process. She can tell us more about the current state of Bitcoin in El Salvador. And I would also like to welcome Adrinana Mira. She's the Salvadoran Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and has been educating Salvadoran diplomats and representatives about Bitcoin. And she has also received an enormous amount of feedback from the international community regarding this project.
Bravo.
We are grateful to have both of them here with us today. Please give another warm welcome to our guests.
Dankeschön.
We will begin with a short presentation, and after we will discuss everything in more detail. Mrs. Hayem, Mrs. Mira, once again, welcome to Innsbruck. We are very excited to hear what you have to say. The stage is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Dankeschön. Guten Tag, everyone. That's where I'll leave the other language aside. My name is Maria Luisa Hayem, and I'm the Minister of Economy of El Salvador. I was part of President Bukele's team since day one, back in June of 2019, and this afternoon, I'm very happy to be here. I'm very honored to represent President Bukele's government, and I'm very honored to be here with Vice Minister Adriana Mira, who's my colleague and also a professional that I admire hugely. I wanted to thank you, everyone, for making us part of this event. I know how huge it is for everyone sitting in these chairs here in person, and I know there's also a lot of people watching us through YouTube, so I wanted to thank you for your interest. Thank you for that interest to get to know the experience of El Salvador. We have a presentation that we want to share with you, and we hope that you find it as exciting as we find not only the presentation, but everything that's happening in El Salvador. We're basically, as you will see, and I hope you go with this takeaway, as you will see, we're basically transforming a country that has been underdeveloped in the past, stagnated growth for decades, and now we're seeing a complete opposite version of El Salvador. I actually call it El Salvador 2.0, and I hope that all of you have the opportunity to at some point visit our country. I'm going to need the pointer, actually. Gracias. Great. So we have an agenda for the next 40 minutes now. First, I'm going to share with you about the adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender in El Salvador, all the phases that we have gone through this first year of implementation of Bitcoin as a second legal tender, and then I'll share about where we are in El Salvador, what's El Salvador today, how's the economy doing, also impacted by the adoption of Bitcoin, and I'm going to share about where we're headed. Later on, and to close our presentation, Vice Minister Mira will share about strategic milestones for economic growth and how important it is that the international community learns about what's going on in El Salvador, understands the opportunities that there are in El Salvador, and join us in this transformation. So starting with the adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender, as you might remember, El Salvador was back in the news June of last year, and this time El Salvador was back in the news for a good reason. And that's huge for Salvadorans, because having the opportunity to living abroad, I can tell everyone I told someone I was from El Salvador, the feeling that I got is that bad news came into their mind. And now, every time that I have the opportunity to travel for work, and I talk to a cab driver, I talk to anyone in the street of any country around the world, first thing that they ask is, how is Bitcoin adoption going? And surf too. I have to accept that surf is also back in the minds of the people, and that's something that, as a government, makes us very proud. We went from either not being in the map or being in the map for bad news. We went to being in the map because we're at the forefront of financial technology, something that maybe something that I'm sure maybe no one in this world would have imagined 3 years and 3 months ago. So this is how I was the person in charge of bringing this draft law to Congress, and we had a huge acceptance. There were 62 votes out of 84 votes, and we made it. We made it, and since that was the first, I call it like the first step towards another 3 that happened later. The other 3 steps was, once the Bitcoin law was approved, it gave the government 3 months in order to develop a digital solution for Salvadorans to be able to transact, to be able to receive payments, do payments, withdraw money, and that is how Chivo Wallet was born. Chivo Wallet has a lot of very interesting features, we think, and very important features that allow the lower income population to be able to now, from one day to another, access services like payments which otherwise they would have never been able to access. It also allows the entire Salvadoran population and merchants, a small merchant in the coast of El Salvador, it gives the opportunity to receive payments from all of you. I know some of you will be coming soon to El Salvador, and they have the obligation, the responsibility to accept Bitcoin, but through this technology, if they don't want to hold Bitcoin, for instance, they want to stick to the US dollar, which is our local currency, pegged to our local, our colon. If they want to stick to dollars, they can do it. They can also make transactions directly to a bank account. And in this sense, we're giving the opportunity to every Salvadoran who wants to use it, the opportunity to use it. But those who don't feel excited about it, or those they don't feel prepared about it, they don't necessarily they don't have to use it. So that's one of the great features about this wallet, Chivo Wallet, the fact that you can have a real-time conversion of payments. So that was the second milestone. So first, approve the law. Second, prepare for September 7th. September 7th was the day that Bitcoin was going to become a legal tender in El Salvador. And then the fear and fallacies start being out there. So the US dollar will disappear and we will not have more US dollars in El Salvador economy. That's one of many fallacies that I'm sure you've been hearing since the president announced his interest in adopting Bitcoin as a legal tender. And the fourth milestone was prepare the population, prepare our small merchants, prepare our financial system, prepare our companies on how to use this currency and how to use the government solution. One of the interesting things that happened in El Salvador is that the financial system, actually one of the biggest banks of the financial system, at the same time that the government comes out with an electronic wallet, also one of the biggest banks in the country came out with a similar solution, showing that the financial sector was also being part of this big project, instead of seeing the contrary, some opposition to this nation project. So what has happened next, after we did all this work, the drafting of the law, the approval of the law, the development of the app, and the training, we are now seeing many positive effects in El Salvador. We are something that we saw, and I believe it's one of the biggest positive impacts of El Salvador, is what I was mentioning earlier, is the fact that El Salvador has positioned itself at being at the forefront of technology. El Salvador was for the first time many years, a pioneer in the use of a technology in order to access, to increase the access to financial inclusion, in order to attract more investment. And this is something that, the government can be criticized, but it's difficult to fight against the arguments. So we were the first one, and that's something that no one is going to be able to take out of El Salvador. And I actually joke around and say, when have you seen in your history books someone that did the same thing for the second time? It's almost, maybe it happened, but it's nothing that we'll keep in our mind. Another result that we've seen, and something that we actually have very close to our heart, is the fact that before adopting Bitcoin, more than 70% of our population didn't have access to a bank account. I know you hear this from many countries around the world. Being these countries developed or underdeveloped, the access to financial services has been an issue, and from our perspective, it has been one of the barriers for economic growth and the generation of opportunities. As of September 7th of last year, we have seen an increased usage of technology in order to access financial services. Through the use of Chivo Wallet, like I mentioned earlier, the transactions that are made within the network, meaning from one Chivo Wallet to another Chivo Wallet, there's no cost. So the access to payments is now in the hands of population that would have never have had the access to payments, the possibility to accumulate wealth and not have your cash going with you everywhere. That's also something that has now improved. Also, something that I really like about this project is that small merchants, for instance, in the coast again, or in the northern area of El Salvador, can now have access to the information of what they sell, what they are buying to their providers. They can have a financial report of what's going on with their finances, same as a multinational company had done most of their lives, probably. But now we have this tool, again, in the phone of the most vulnerable merchants. And of course, if big companies were also welcome to use this app. So that's another, what we see, a positive impact. And even those who didn't use Chivo Wallet but are using other wallets, or that did use Chivo Wallet and maybe don't use it anymore, there was a first contact with technology in order to access financial services. So we see also that as a great benefit. Also, El Salvador has now the opportunity to access new sources of financing that otherwise would have never been able to access. And when I talk about new sources of financing, I'm referring to financing for private projects, but also financing of government execution. And with this, I remind those who are interested in investing in our volcano bonds, that's a project that is in our agenda, so I will ask for a little patience, and hopefully soon we're going to be sharing good news about that. In terms of other benefits that we're seeing is more interest in investing in El Salvador. Again, El Salvador has been that country that was growing the least among Central American countries, the country that didn't have the business climate, was right down in the worst positions ever, and now we're seeing all these changes, and this is helping us call the attention of investors, not only investors in cryptocurrencies, but also investors in other currencies as the US dollar. And the sectors that we're seeing more interest are the real estate, tourism, technology, energy, and mining. And one that is very, very important for us is the increased tourism that we have seen since and even before the adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender. As of July of this year, El Salvador had received 47% more dollars than it had done before the pandemic in July of 2019. Again, this is huge, and this one of the reasons why we're seeing this increase is because of the tourism that Bitcoin has generated, but also its business, tourism, and also our diaspora. Our diaspora is well connected with the government and are now going back to El Salvador after 40 years of having gone back. The new generations that haven't been in El Salvador are going to El Salvador, and they're staying longer. And that's very important for us because it's helping us develop areas in the interior of the country that were very, very underdeveloped and abandoned in the past. And a very interesting effect that this policy has had in El Salvador is that there has been a huge interest of companies related to the crypto ecosystem and fintech in general. And we see now that every day there's a new company being established in El Salvador. As of today, we have 63 new companies registered in El Salvador in order to be part of these transformation. Some of these companies are looking to test products in El Salvador's market to then be able to take these products to the Central American region, the Latin American regions, and other regions around the world. One of the best moments in this job is when I'm talking to companies and they say, I want to see my logo be part of this group of companies. So again, I invite everyone who's interested to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to share more about what it takes to be registered in El Salvador. So where is El Salvador and where we're headed? I don't know if we still have time. ¿Estamos con tiempo?
I think just a little bit.
Perfect. I'm going to try to go faster now. Where we are, El Salvador last year grew 10.3%. Again, for El Salvador, this is huge. We have been growing for decades around 2%, if not less. And now we are committed to create the best business environment in Latin America, and the numbers are showing that what we're doing, it's actually working. Again, 2021 was a year where there was a rebound from 2020, but still 2021 we saw imports of machinery for companies showing that they were increasing their capacity to produce more. We also had 26.1% increase in our annual exports. We had a 24% increase in our private investments, and we very fastly recovered all those jobs that were suspended over pandemic, and we were above on 171.5% by the end of that year. As of April of 2021, El Salvador had already recovered all the jobs that had been affected by pandemic. And this is great, 2021, great news. And of course, we wanted to see what was gonna happen this year. The good news, exports are 17% higher than what they were by July of this year. That was great. So we're hoping to see good results this coming year. I wanted to take a zoom out on what's happening in El Salvador because there's a lot happening in El Salvador. It's not only Bitcoin, it's actually security. El Salvador is now committed, the government of El Salvador is now committed for El Salvador to become the safest country in Latin America, and we're moving forward very fast. We're also working on education reform, but we're also working on these 12 pillars or areas that we believe are going to take El Salvador to its maximum development. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to go one by one, but just to mention some of them, we're working to make sure that El Salvador becomes an e-government where our responses will be in 24 hours for those companies interested in investing in El Salvador, those interested in growing. We will be providing the fastest response and the possibility to do all the procedures in an automatic fashion. We're also working in updating our regulatory framework with a commitment that El Salvador has a modernized regulatory framework with the right incentives and that creates a government that responds fast to company solutions. Financial solutions, we already discussed one of the huge decisions that have been taken in order to expand the access to finance. Human talent, it's also one that we hold close to our heart. Our youth and our people are our biggest asset, and we are, for the first time in many years, working together with academia, private sector, and government all together in order to generate, in a very short period of time, more employment in El Salvador. We're also working in increasing the access to quality energy, actually reaching every single Salvadorian and provide access to energy to every single Salvadorian, and same thing with connectivity. And behind all this huge work, this ecosystem, we have a large amount of projects that are ongoing. You've heard Bitcoin City, but also we're working very hard in trade facilitation, investment facilitation. We're working in creating Surf City that I'm hoping all of you here are able to go and see at some point. And given the positioning that we now have by having adopted and being the first in adopting Bitcoin as a legal tender, what we're doing now is that we're building on that reputation and that work that we have done, those strong bases that we have built, and now we're working to create every single condition that companies in the tech sector need in order to establish in El Salvador, to grow in El Salvador, and to operate in an agile fashion. We're focusing our efforts in attracting companies from the crypto ecosystem, something that's happened very organically, actually. We're also interested in seeing our companies in the tech outsourcing services increase. We're already strong in this sector. Some of the companies are growing at 300% yearly, and we believe there's a huge potential in El Salvador to become a bigger tech outsourcing services provider. We are also pushing for the establishment of more companies that are using artificial intelligence in order to solve solutions of the public, but also the private sector. And before I end, I wanted to share with you all why do we think El Salvador is the right place to invest if you're a technology company. As I mentioned earlier, we're very committed in creating this environment that will provide all what companies need, being government services, but also a regulatory framework, the talent that you need. We also have been known for having a neutral accent in both languages, English and Spanish. We have a huge commitment, and we're investing in creating the skills that the technology world needs, not only today, but in the future. Again, working in a regulatory framework, because of our strategic geographical location, We have convenient hours that connect us very well with the north of America, but also the south of America. And something that I kind of feel is not very well known about El Salvador is that we have a very a matrix that is very committed and it's friendly with the environment. Last year, 80% of the production of energy in El Salvador came from renewable energies. So this is where I end. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'll pass the mic to Vice Minister Mira. Thank you.
Gracias.
Te lo paso tú.
Está bien. Well, thank you so much. Gracias, Ministra. Guten Tag. I don't want to take most of your time because I don't want you to fall asleep. And I know that we're going to have time for questions. So I'm going to be very fast on this, but probably you will ask why, if she is the expert, because she is the expert. The Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of El Salvador is here. And this is a commitment. This is a commitment of the government of El Salvador. We are working together also with the foreign services of El Salvador to get opportunities to El Salvador, investment, commerce, and for sure, the adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender facilitates this. The adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender positions El Salvador in the front fork of the financial technology and innovation in general. As Minister said before, probably you didn't know where and what is El Salvador, or if you had an idea what is El Salvador, probably you should find in Google criminality, violence, and bad news. Now, with the decision of the President Bukele, we have an opportunity and we have the spotlight in El Salvador. Like almost everybody now knows where is El Salvador and what we're doing there. Our country seeks digital transformation and innovation through the Digital Nation project and its roadmap Digital Agenda 2030. And as I told you, we are working on that very, very hard. We are trying to get more investment to El Salvador. The foreign services of El Salvador is working really hard. And by the way, we are here because last year there was a mission of Bitcoiners in El Salvador going from Germany. Now we're going to have another one going not only for Germany, but also from Austria. So if you would like to join, I know that this is a lot of pressure for the ambassador of El Salvador in Austria, but if you would like to go, we are going to be receiving you there in November so you can see with your own eyes what is going on in El Salvador. Thank you. But as Minister also said, it is not only Bitcoin. President Bukele knows that in order for the well-being of Salvadorian people, we need to work together on security. We need to make El Salvador one of the safest countries around the world, and we are achieving it now. We need to educate. We need to give more technology to our people. Now, the government has a program of giving laptops for students in El Salvador, and not only laptops, but also internet, because we know that for Bitcoin, we need to give the tools for the population. Also, we are promoting this, and we are looking for more opportunities abroad. And if you would like to join, if you would like to make part of this, we will really, really open and glad to receiving you in El Salvador. At the end of 1 year of the implementation of Bitcoin as a legal tender, a total of 130.5 million in family remittances have been received through Chivo Wallet. For you to have a better idea, we are almost 7 million Salvadorians living in the country, but more than 3 million Salvadorians living abroad. Most of them left because of past situation of insecurity. There were a lot of problems in El Salvador, as you may know. So most of them probably, since they don't have documents to live, for example, in the United States, doesn't have any bank account. They don't have bank access. Now we have the Chivo. Chivo is the app that El Salvador, the government of El Salvador, launched for the implementation of Bitcoin, and ATMs in the consulates of El Salvador in the US, in most of them. So Salvadorians can go to a consulate of El Salvador and send the remittances to El Salvador, and you can see the increase even taking consideration that we are now on we know, not only El Salvador, we as a world now are in a crisis, of economical crisis, but the numbers of El Salvador are really good. This is not working. So for El Salvador, the priority is to attract investment to our country. And again, you are more than welcome to go to El Salvador. It is a pillar, and we would like to encourage you to go and check what we're doing. The Foreign Services of El Salvador, as I told you, is working on that. So if you are here, you can go to the Embassy of El Salvador in Austria, but in any country you are in El Salvador, you can feel the support of the embassy and consulates of El Salvador around the world. We motivate our investors to visit El Salvador to fall in love with the country, with the people, and with the project. So thank you so much. I don't want to take more time. We are going to have a space for questions, but again, thank you so much for having us here.
So thanks again for this a little longer than expected keynote, but now it's time for the discussion I'm really looking forward to. Please take a seat. Here.
Is there a preferred seating?
Here, please.
Okay.
So, Mrs. Hayem, after the first year, the opinion of the world is that the Salvadoran Bitcoin project is not going well. Most headlines even say that the experiment has failed and it's time to abandon this project. And I assume you disagree with these opinions. So what is your answer to the critics? Why do you think the Bitcoin project in El Salvador has not failed?
Thank you. Well, I'll start by inviting people that are thinking that to join us to Bitcoin 2022 in Innsbruck next time so that they can hear from the government and they can hear with strong data of what is it that we're seeing. I was mentioning, for instance, 63 companies registered in El Salvador in a period of a year. That's big. Big, maybe not only for a small country, it's a significant number that shows that there is an interest in, again, testing new solutions and being able to take startup companies or take or have big investments come to El Salvador. So I would remind what I've just shared. Only the positioning of El Salvador in the world on how El Salvador rethought the way we were doing, the country was being evolving, taking a step back and thinking outside of the box. I feel that has taken us where we are right now with this positioning, that it's also a huge positive impact. I was mentioning earlier too, the financial inclusion aspect. Most of our vulnerable population were completely excluded of the financial services, and now in a very short period of time, we're seeing that opportunity of being in touch with technology to access these services, but also to the possibility of accumulating wealth, like I mentioned earlier, to be able to have access to payments. 4 million people have downloaded the TiVo wallet, and the government was committed that through the bonus of $30 to each Salvadoran, the Salvadoran population was going to have the opportunity to use the app, but at the same time to be able to learn how to use it. So there has been a whole financial education and financial access doors that have been opened with the use of Bitcoin. I also believe that seeing 1 year after taking a big decision and adopting a big project like the one we're implementing, it's very short-sighted. This project has a potential because the value of Bitcoin, it will grow as it has been in the past. It will grow in the future. So, judging the optimal or the operation and validity of this project in a year. It's also maybe too short of time also to talk about it, right?
Okay,
in that way.
But what is a reasonable time frame to evaluate this project? 5 years, 10 years?
Well, as the value of the cryptocurrency keeps increasing, we will see more and more benefits. But as of today, in a year of execution, I've shared the benefits that we have, and I think we can not even imagine what all the positive benefits that the adoption of cryptocurrency as Bitcoin will have in our economy at a microeconomic level, but also at a macroeconomic level. Saying exactly a year of when we will see the maximum benefits achieved, it can be hard. But I can say we have already, with authority, we are already seeing the benefits. We cannot even imagine what are the benefits that are coming in the future as the cryptocurrency keeps having a higher value.
Okay. Let's stay a little bit on the topic. You mentioned the positive development. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but there isn't much information publicly available. But isn't it true that currently only 1 in 5 businesses is accepting Bitcoin as payment, and only 5% of payments are processed in Bitcoin, and the country's investment has decreased more than 50%, and to be fair, the people are far from using it as everyday money. For instance, only 2% of remittances are sent using Bitcoin. These aren't very convincing numbers, are they?
Yeah, well, talking about investments, it actually shocks me to hear it, because what the data is showing is that investment is actually increasing. In a context where we have high levels of inflation.
No, the Bitcoin investment, the Bitcoin the country bought. The value is down 50%.
I thought you were talking about investment, so I was a little bit worried about the data that you were using. Yeah, again, what we're seeing in this very short period of time is that the uptake of this kind of technology, it's a new project, right? So things are not gonna change from one day to another. I remember people asking me the next week after adoption, they were asking, so what's the impact and what's going on? And it's a policy like this, it will not provide its maximum benefit in a year period, right? So I think that's very important to acknowledge. We believe that as the currency keeps its trend of increasing the value, all these projects that we have talked to with many investors in the sector of tourism, in the sector of real estate, they are all going to become a reality. I was mentioning earlier too. We are working on putting out our bonds in order to have additional sources of financing more than the ones that we already have from private buyers and international organizations. So again, I think the merit is there in the sense that we took this decision, we had the courage to take this decision, and we are putting together all the conditions that need to happen in order to achieve the better results. Again, normally in other government decisions and other policies, things will not change from one day to another or 1 year to another. Things can take some time, especially when you're talking about a cryptocurrency where the trend is to grow in time, right? The value of Bitcoin, the tendency is to grow in time.
Okay, I would like to continue discussing the Salvadorans' opinion on Bitcoin. President Bukele is very popular among the people in El Salvador. According to different polls, he has approval ratings of between 80 and 90%. But it's interesting that the Bitcoin law is the president's most unpopular project. It seems the people still don't share the government's enthusiasm for Bitcoin. So why haven't you managed to convince the people of El Salvador that the Bitcoin project is not only for national benefit, but also to benefit the citizens individually?
See, so we believe that the citizens will, it's going to be convincing of the people who are going to start using it. And we see a higher usage of Bitcoin after it entry into force. We see it, and that's clear. We already had Salvadorans using this cryptocurrency. Many of you might have heard Bitcoin Beach. Bitcoin Beach is where actually the usage of Bitcoin happened even before the government took a decision, and they are also promoters of this initiative. Someone was asking me at some point, how are you going to force Salvadorans to use the cryptocurrency? And that's not the objective at all. The objective is to provide an additional alternative to access financial services, but Salvadorans are in the total right to use it if they want it or not, if they don't. So I think it's...
What are you going to improve the situations? What are your plans to finally get the people on board? Are you investing in educational programs?
Yes. We actually, I was mentioning earlier, phase 4 of the implementation of Bitcoin was education. Education and training was given to every single company. We actually leveraged technology to reach every single company of the formal sector. We had trainings and webinars in order to teach and train about the cryptocurrency, but also about the app, so that the companies get to know how to use the app. Even banks adopted the tool as its own. So that's one thing that we did. We also partner with the beverage and food companies, those big companies that take these products throughout the entire country to small merchants and the most vulnerable merchants in El Salvador, and through that, through them, we're able to train more merchants. We are seeing only in the tourism sector, we're seeing more than 400 companies, and that's huge for a country that's starting to develop the tourism sector. 400 companies. I had the opportunity myself to go to a very remote area in the mountains in El Salvador, where I myself was able to use my Tigo wallet, which is actually targeted for Salvadorans as of today. So again, as we have all these investments that I was mentioning earlier, investments that become concrete, and we make those investments happen from the government perspective, but also the private sector. When Salvadorans see the benefit of accessing payments at a zero cost, when we experience the benefit, that is something that we believe is going to help us push forward the uptake and the usage of this cryptocurrency. Again, the objective being that we all benefit in a way, if we're interested in benefit of this tool, right, of this new option. And I think that there might be a misconception of we want everyone to be using Bitcoin. It's a second legal tender, and if Salvadorans find it, like as many have done already, find it useful, we are providing the education on the enterprise side, but we'll also have available educational training online that we're delivering to the population. And we're actually very happy to see private sector initiatives that are also pushing forward the training, so that it becomes a more use alternative. If I believe, as a citizen, if I believe that that's going to help me in my finances, in my daily life. And I think that's very important to understand. El Salvador is already getting the benefits of more tourism, of people who had never thought they would be in El Salvador. That's a huge benefit. We're seeing it in the numbers, 47% increase of dollars versus what we had before the pandemic. We're seeing this growth that I was mentioning earlier, a growth in a context where there is, at some point we had very high levels of oil prices, we have a container crisis, we have shortage in basic goods, flowers and corn that are so important, and still with everything that's going on, El Salvador is having this important growth. So this is one of the variables that help in El Salvador be in such a great shape today.
Okay. Ms. Mira, let's talk a little bit about the feedback you have received so far. 1 year after 1 year of implementing the Bitcoin law, how has the international awareness of El Salvador changed, and are you satisfied with the international reactions?
Well, I think that and not only me, but also the government. As I told in the presentation, there is an economical crisis around the world. And El Salvador, one of the main reasons why we are not that path, that we are growing, is because of Bitcoin. As the minister said, El Salvador now is in the spotlight. I think that thinking about using Bitcoin to buy a candy, for sure you can do it, but it is a very simple way to see it. If we have some criticism from abroad, it is because I think they are seeing like that. And I'm pretty sure that when the president thought about this idea of putting Bitcoin as a legal tender, he was thinking in bigger things. Remittances, for example, are more than 20% of the GDP. And most of the Salvadorians living abroad, before the implementation of Bitcoin, had to pay a lot in houses such as Western Union and things like that, because they don't have now a bank account. So as I told, there are Chivo ATM in most of the consulates of El Salvador in the US, and you can use the Chivo app in 14 countries now, and still growing. We are working on that. And that makes the remittances to flow even better, even easier. I know that there are some criticism, especially for the press, but well, President Bukele is breaking all of that. I think he has a new way to do things, and as you said, President Bukele now has more than 90% of the approval of the population, not only for Salvadorians living in El Salvador, but also for our diaspora. That is very important for us.
Okay, speaking of the president, in January he predicted that this year 2 more countries will adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, and that Bitcoin will reach $100,000. 2 statements we haven't seen come true yet. Could you give me some reasons why El Salvador is a good example of how to adopt Bitcoin as a national currency? We can just speculate why other countries have been more reluctant to adopt Bitcoin, but do you think El Salvador is a good example how to adopt Bitcoin?
I think so. I think so because we are working on that really hard as a government. And it is an option. I think we don't have to lose that path. It is an option for freedom. It is an option for population to use it. If they want to save with US dollars, that is the other legal tender, they can do so. But if they need to have another option, and I think there is a lot of Salvadorians that need another option, they can do it. So we are working really hard. We know that El Salvador still has a lack of technology in some areas of the country, but we are working really hard to move forward on that. We are working really hard to have internet access now. As I told you, there are more than 45 embassies of El Salvador working to bring more cooperation to El Salvador, more investment to El Salvador. We have received a lot of missions, not only from Germany and now Austria, but also from the US and some other countries, of investors that are now in El Salvador, and a lot of people, and a lot of them are investors of Bitcoin. They use Bitcoin, and they now are living in El Salvador.
Okay, a follow-up question to one of your slides. In the digital agenda, there's mentioned the crypto ecosystem. And as you might know, a lot of people in the Bitcoin community are somehow sensitive to the word crypto. It's kind of a hot topic, but I can understand why governments all over the world are tempted to adopt different cryptocurrencies or issue their own digital money or digital cryptocurrency. So do you have a plan to adopt or issue any other cryptocurrency besides Bitcoin? Maybe a CBDC, a stable coin, something like, I don't know, digital colon dollar?
As of today, the plan is to keep working to have this project be a success. And we're already, again, I think I mentioned it already 5 times, but we're already seeing the benefits, but our focus is to make sure that we are able to benefit the most from these very courageous decision and project that we're currently implementing. Having said that, as I mentioned earlier, financial access is not the only area where El Salvador is having significant changes. We have been positioned in trade, for instance, trade facilitation and the sustainability of trade facilitation in El Salvador now has put our country at a level where, according to international organizations, we're better off than other developing countries in Latin America, like Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. So we are becoming champions in many areas. We became a champion during pandemic. We're one of the countries that was recognized for better managing our pandemic, for having a very fast, providing a very fast access to vaccines. In the worst times of crisis, we were also known for providing those the financial access for companies and bonuses for households to be able to recover. And all of these actions have El Salvador in the place where we are today, in a place where we're seeing economic growth despite everything that's going on around the world. So our objective keeps being keep thinking outside of the box, on learning things that we learned in the past. We want to make things different. El Salvador has a huge opportunity in the sense that the adoption of technology was also stagnated as it was the growth. It makes sense. And the huge opportunity for El Salvador today is that we can leapfrog and go to the next level in terms of the usage and adoption of technology and not have to go through the whole learning process and the slower process that other countries have gone through. So we actually are thinking all the time how we can adopt technology, how we can do the things different in order to get a real development, economic development, and provide a better quality of life of our citizens. We believe that a lot was said it was good to do, a lot was done. We were a great student on doing the right thing, but unfortunately, that didn't take us too far. So what we're doing right now is making sure that in every single thing that we do within the government, the question of what technology are we adopting, how we're doing it differently, is there to make sure that we reach that transformation in a fast fashion. Because this is what we're seeing. Before it was thought that it will take ages to improve the lives of people, and we're doing that in a daily basis. And we're doing that, again, from the economic perspective, but we're doing it in the security side too. We're doing it in health, and we're doing it in security, health, and the economy side of things. Mm-hmm.
Okay, talking about doing things differently, in preparation for this panel, I had some trouble finding official information regarding El Salvador's Bitcoin holdings. The only official source are tweets by President Bukele that the country bought Bitcoins using more than $100 million of public money. So one of the main features of Bitcoin is transparency, which means it's very easy to prove ownership of your digital assets. So every Bitcoin transaction is recorded on the blockchain and can be verified by anyone. Don't trust, verify, as Bitcoiners say. But without any official records, it's impossible to verify that El Salvador really has access to these funds. Everyone just has to trust that these transactions have happened, which is, to be honest, disappointing. So don't you think publishing this information would help strengthen the Salvadorans' people's trust in the Bitcoin project?
Yeah, so good thing that you bring that topic, Friedemann, because actually those $100 million was the fund that was created by law. I'm going to go back to my presentation. We created this fund, the Congress approved the creation of this fund of $100 million in order to make sure that September 7th, when the implementation, when the adoption of Bitcoin as a legal tender was going to enter into force, Salvadorans had a solution in order to be able to do the reconversion, the real-time reconversion, and have that app available in their phones. And the money was used in order to, of course, develop this solution, but mainly to make sure that Salvadorans had the bonus that I mentioned earlier for Salvadorans to learn by doing. And be able to learn how to use the app. So in that sense, every Salvadorian knows how the government funds were used, because they were beneficiaries of the money that was given by the government. So I think that's as transparent as it can get, in the sense that the government has used the government funding by law in order to launch this huge project that, as I mentioned earlier, we're only starting to see the benefits that maybe we cannot even imagine, how all the benefits that are coming in the near and the medium and long-term future.
Okay, just to avoid the misunderstanding, I was referring to the tweets of President Bukele buying dips constantly over the year, adding up to 100 million in Bitcoin invested. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. So to wrap up the whole panel, I have a final question for each one of you. So my final question for you, Mrs. Hayem, is, from what you've learned, what advice can you give to other countries planning to adopt Bitcoin? If there's one thing you could have done differently, what would it be?
I think more than an advice, I think showing the data that we're on tourism that I was mentioning earlier, showing the opportunities that are being created in El Salvador by the adoption of these innovative policy. I think that's where I would go. We would be happy to share with, like we're doing today, to share with other people around the world on the 4 phases that we went through, and how now we are able to have 63 companies registering in El Salvador, 47% increased tourism, partially due to the adoption of Bitcoin. And I would let the other persons, and I would let other countries, take this information and take the decisions that they deem they're better for their countries.
Okay, so there's nothing you would have done differently, looking back? Looking back,
I think El Salvador, and I'm sure El Salvador took the right approach that we take in every single policy that we implement, which is an approach that's holistic, and all the pieces of the puzzle were there. The development of the law was there. The training was there. We work together with telecommunications companies to still expand the access to telecommunications services. So that's our way of working. We understand where the opportunity is, we understand where the problem is, and we work together in an articulated fashion led by the vision of by a visionary person like President Bukele in order to implement our policies. So I would say that's our DNA. That's the way we did Bitcoin. That's the way we approach trade facilitation. That's the way we approach investment facilitation. And we believe that the reason why there has been underdeveloped in the past is because we were trying to solve an issue, maybe changing one thing, and that is most likely never the case. You have to think outside of the box. You have to unlearn things. You have to rethink, and you have to take a holistic approach, and you have to have a team like the one we have with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the same relationship we have with the Ministry of Environment. The working together as a team is making that as a government we have a greater impact in a shorter term of the policies that we're taking.
Okay, thank you very much. And my final question for you, Mrs. Mira, is what development surprised you the most?
What, sorry?
What development surprised you the most?
What development surprised?
Developments in what sense?
In the last year, was there something, maybe the Bitcoin price or something that happened you wasn't expecting to happen?
That wasn't expecting. Well, you know, we know that Bitcoin has increases and decreases. And I think that we were prepared for that. We are prepared for that. And President Bukele has said many times that Bitcoin is not for today and maybe not for tomorrow. The results are going to be in the following days, years. For us, it's an investment. We take it like that. Not only as a government, but I've heard from a lot of Salvadorians that they are saving Bitcoins for the future. We really believe that this is a project that we are doing very, very good on that, that we need to provide more tools, and we are working really hard on that. As Minister said, probably this is not the best space to announce the following things that we're doing, because you know that is something for the President Bukele. But I can assure you that we as a government, we as an institutions are working for this implementation to get better every day.
Okay, thank you very much. As I said, unfortunately our time is limited today, but I think we have discussed at least some of the most important topics, and I hope we can continue this discussion next time.
Sure.
I would like to thank you again for being with us today and speaking about this project's progress and the challenges that it's brought to El Salvador. Thank you, Mrs. Hayem. Thank you, Mrs. Mira. Let's give them both another big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.